I call on Government Order of the Day number 1.
Appropriation 2012 City Estimates Bill, interim debate on second reading and amendment proposed.
When the debate was interrupted, Simon O'Connor was speaking. He has 9 minutes remaining to speak should he wish to take the call. Simon O'Connor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I was saying, what a great budget that was, and a fine budget for our time. And Mr. Speaker, I want to congratulate the Minister of Finance for that budget. Also want to thank the many people who are involved with it. I think all of us in the House appreciate that these things don't come together just on the whim of one or the work of one. So I want to acknowledge them as well. But one thing I do want to say is I really love the budget application. I thought it was very much like the National Party. It was innovative, it was leading edge, and it was number 1, Mr. Speaker. It was number 1.
I apologise. Could I just remind members that today all microphones are live. If members want the public to hear a circumstance in the House, the public may not be impressed by, just keep making a lot of noise, and I suspect the public will not be impressed. So I just alert members today, because of the sound system's malfunction, members need to be just a little more circumspect about the level of interjection and the wittiness of interjection and the intellectual content of interjection, because the public will judge what they hear. When they don't hear some of this stuff.
You make a gentleman of a speech.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that the intellectual interjections, which I haven't heard yet, but I'm conscious there is noise. But I was talking about the iPhone budget, the iPad budget, and thinking again, a great budget. Great budget application, but I just wanted to note as well that I've spent a lot of time, Mr. Speaker, on the Labour Party's budget application, on the Labour Party's, the Angry Birds, Mr. Speaker. And I want to thank the Labour Party for their one, the Angry Birds, because you see, as we've just heard, Mr. Speaker, the opposition do a lot of squawking, ruffling their feathers and throwing themselves at the budget over and over again. You see, Mr. Speaker, the National Party's here because we are trying to build something, to build a brighter future, and these Angry Birds, as we've heard earlier today, just continue to throw themselves, squawking, ruffling feathers, and they've all gone silent conspicuously at the moment, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these are tough times, Mr. Speaker. These are tough times, and it's all about cutting your cloth to suit. And, Mr. Speaker, this government has maintained the services and prioritised those servants for the people. Mr. Speaker, this is a budget that is responsible. It is a budget that is focused on growth. Mr. Speaker, it is a budget that is about value for money. And, Mr. Speaker, it is a budget about frontline services, a budget which understands what the people want and open to engaging with the people. And, Mr. Speaker, see, they continue. I must have run afoul with them there. I must have run afoul with them. Mr. Speaker, I've noted in reading some of the other budget speeches, there's been a lot of talk about Charles Dickens. A lot of talk about Charles Dickens coming from the opposition. But, Mr. Speaker, they've missed one of the more interesting characters. Wilkins McCawber, Mr. Speaker, was a character who knew all about the importance of careful financial management, and I'm not really surprised that they're not familiar with him. Mr. McCawber, Mr. Speaker, had an interesting philosophy, and to paraphrase, if I may read it, he said, "The difference between happiness and misery is whether you are spending 10 cents less than you earn or 10 cents more than you earn." Mr. Speaker, the opposition and Labour in particular have never subscribed to this idea, but every household in New Zealand understands what it means. Labour is happy to spend the extra 10 cents, the extra 10 million, the extra $100 million. And so, Mr. Speaker, I reject outright the amendment put forward by the opposition, which is working against this budget. In itself, it is illogical. The very amendment, Mr. Speaker, is illogical. For the opposition, they complain that this budget hasn't made the tough decisions, but then they're complaining, Mr. Speaker, because we have made the tough decisions. This is a budget for the time and an appropriate budget. Mr. Speaker, we could have taken the easy way, we could have taken the Labour Party way to spend and spend some more. But then the bill comes, Mr. Speaker, and it's time to pay up. It's time to pay up. Mr. Speaker, the people of Greece are learning this lesson a little bit late, but because of this budget, New Zealanders will not have to suffer the fate which Greece and other continental powers are suffering at the moment. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to turn my focus on to education. On to education. Here we go again, Mr. Speaker, throwing themselves at the wall. Mr. Speaker, I want to focus on education, notably tertiary education. It's an area of great interest to me. It's an area of great interest to me. It's an area where a number of friends, colleagues, have raised their points and been engaging across the sector over the last few weeks, asking questions. And, you know, there's been a lot of complaints coming from people, particularly those doing postgraduate degrees, be it masters or PhDs. And I note that change is always hard, and I want to acknowledge to those postgraduate students, yeah, change is hard, but I wanted to put a bit of context around these changes, because there has been a lot of noise and a lot of, well, squawking, I think that seems to be the word of the day for them, around this. So just the context around the changes. See, Mr. Speaker, currently, if you study at the universities, the Crown pays 70 cents in every dollar. 70% of course costs are already paid for by the taxpayer, by the Crown. Mr. Speaker, we have interest-free student loans. They are available to all who choose to study, undergraduate or postgraduate. Mr. Speaker, we also know that effectively between 40 to 50 cents in every dollar has to be written off on those student loans, a further cost or a gift, if you like, of the Crown to those who are choosing to study. Mr. Speaker, the context continues to be... with the microphones are disappearing. Mr. Speaker, we also know that there are a multitude of scholarships available to students from the private sector and from the public sector. I note that there were the Prime Minister's Science Prizes were announced yesterday. So already we're having a picture here of a generosity of the Crown, a generosity of the taxpayers to people who choose to study. As I said, 70 cents in every dollar towards their studies, interest-free student loans, a significant write-down on that, scholarships, and of course, Mr. Speaker, we still have 200 weeks of student allowance for those in undergraduate degrees, including those who choose to do honours. But I'm aware that people are not happy, and I have to say, particularly those students who are unhappy, I find that the generosity of the taxpayer really is nothing short of astonishing. If you look at it in that context, the giving that the taxpayer provides is nothing short of astonishing. But, you know, of course, some people are still not happy. And while I cannot fully hear the interjections, I'm aware that some people are still not happy, because you realise there's about 20,000 people in this country who are doing masters or postgraduate degrees. That's a 0.5% of the population. And what has been asked for here in the complaints around this budget to do with tertiary education is that the 0.5% want more. They want more than 70% of their fees paid. They want more than 200 weeks of allowance. They want more than an interest-free student loan. They want more than the scholarships. They want more than the opportunities, Mr. Speaker. As we well know, for most who do postgraduate, there is opportunity to earn money through their teaching and tutorials and so forth. And, Mr. Speaker, I say this not just as someone who speaks in theory, but someone who has done 2 postgraduate degrees, and very conscious that you do this freely and through a choice. And for the record, Mr. Speaker, I did my first postgraduate degree while working full-time and studying part-time, because I was aware of the financial considerations. And just to add to it, because I recall the Green Party making an emotional but empty series of statements, when I did my second postgraduate degree, I was doing that working full-time and studying full-time. You see, Mr. Speaker, education is a choice, and choices can be made. And I, for one, as a postgraduate student, have appreciated what the Crown has done. Mr. Speaker, as I wrap up, I would like to say, you know, in theory, I would wish that everything was free. It would be great. But that is not the world that we live in. Only in Labour do they think that everything should be free. And I'm conscious we're only a few weeks away from the midwinter sort of Christmas, if you like. And, you know, Labour does have a Christmas list that's a mile long. But, Mr. Speaker, Santa is not going to pay for the bills and the gifts that Labour wants to give away, because in the real world, Mr. Speaker, we understand that grown-ups have to pay the bill. So we're not going to allow Labour to have people to sit on their lap and demand gift after gift, because it's ultimately the taxpayer that's going to groan and pay the bill. Mr. Speaker, I come back to where I started. This is a sensible budget. It is a budget for its time. I am proud of the decisions that have been made, proud of the decisions that have been made in education and particularly in the tertiary sector. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
I call the Honourable